Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar hosted by Region 10 and Partners Resource Network. My name is Sarah Untersee and I am the School Family and Community Engagement Consultant at Region 10. The topic for today's webinar is Understanding Motivations and Conflict. A few housekeeping items before we get started today. If you need technical assistance during today's webinar, we do have Ashton Rowe with us today from Region 10 to provide that support. You can send her a chat message if you need any help. Today's webinar will be recorded and will be made available on the Region 10 website. It usually takes about a week in order for that to be posted, but we will drop the website link into the chat so that you are able to access that once it becomes available. Do you have questions about special education? You can contact us at SpedTex, your source for special education information, and we're happy to help. The contact information is on the screen. I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie McLaughlin to share a little bit about Partners Resource Network.
Thank you, Sarah, and welcome everyone. My name is Stephanie McLaughlin, and I am the Training and Evaluation Specialist for Partners Resource Network. Partners Resource Network, or PRN, is the nonprofit agency that operates the Texas statewide network of parent training and information centers. We are funded through the Department of Education Office of Special Education Programs. And throughout Texas, there are 4 projects known as PACT, PATH, PEN, and TEAM. Our mission at Partners Resource Network is to empower and support Texas families and individuals impacted by disabilities or special healthcare needs. We do this through a network of highly skilled, regionally located coordinators who are knowledgeable in local policies, services, and resources, as well as state and local and national guidelines. We provide training, information, and one-on-one assistance at no cost to Texas families and youth. We serve parents of children and youth with disabilities from birth to age 26, as well as youth self-advocates between the ages of 14 and 26.
Thanks, Stephanie. We are excited to welcome our presenter, Randall Reese, from the Center for Appropriate Dispute Resolution in Special Education, or CADRE. Mr. Reese has a BA in Communication Studies and an MS in Human Performance Technology and Instructional Design from Boise State University. He worked as a professor of communication at Boise State from 1998 to 2012, and as an adjunct graduate professor in the Dispute Resolution Certification Program until 2018. He was also a founding member of the faculty of the Department of Communication at the College of Western Idaho from 2007 to 2014. Randall began mediating after receiving a certificate in dispute resolution from Boise State in 1998. His first project was to start a student-run community mediation program at Boise State to resolve neighbor and nonprofit organization disputes for the Boise Treasure Valley community. He then worked with a civil court judge, the Honorable Patricia Young, to start a still functioning student training program, whereby student mediators could work with certified mediators in mediating small claims cases for the 4th District Court in Ada County. Randall also had a successful private practice mediating family and business disputes and delivering mediation and conflict management workshops between 1998 and today. He has mediated more than 1,700 disputes over his career in a wide number of modalities, including victim offender, large group, public policy, and community violence. He has also facilitated many groups in problem solving, decision-making, and creativity. He served as president of the Idaho Mediation Association from 2007 to 2010, and Randall describes his preferred mediation styles as interest-based, facilitative, and transformative. At this time, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to Randall, and we will place a link to the PDF of today's presentation into the chat. Thanks, Randall, for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. It's nice to be here. And hello to everybody out there. I'll share my screen. Everybody see my screen? All right. Now I just need to adjust this real quick so I can see my PowerPoint. Okay. I'm going to kind of start with where I or how I got into conflict. I was in the construction business back in the 80s and damaged my knee, and my doctor said I should probably go find something else to do. And I ended up working in Section 8 housing, and I kind of, that's where I got my joy of service, helping people out of a jam, getting people housing. But part of that job was to mediate landlord-tenant disputes. And I am a conflict avoider by nature. And I wasn't real comfortable with conflict. And my job was an arbiter, which meant that each side told me their story, and then I decided what they would do and told them what they had to do. And nobody ever liked it. They always appealed those decisions. And we'd have to fly somebody in from Montana to hear the case. And they would make the same decision I did because, frankly, the decisions pretty much came out of a book. And we lost landlords and people lost housing, and it wasn't a very great process. So I was complaining to my sister, Melanie Reese, who many of you probably know, and she was in Nebraska in graduate school learning about mediation. And she said, well, you should mediate, not arbitrate. And she explained it to me, a brief process. And I just happened to have a arbitration in a couple of days, and I went and mediated it instead. And it's basically, I facilitated a discussion between the people and let them come up with their solutions. And it worked. And I didn't have an appeal for over a year. And my boss came to me one day and asked me what I was doing, and I explained it to her, and she told me I had to go back to doing it the old way, which I didn't completely understand, but I did understand that I'd found this thing in conflict. I felt so useful that I wanted to do that. So I left that agency and I decided to go to college and learn about conflict, and that's how I started on that path that was in my introduction. Not only did it change the way I felt very useful in other people's conflicts, but I noticed it changed the way that I dealt with people, and it really improved my relationships. So that's where I'm coming from in conflict and in mediations. I just wanted to give that to them, what I found in my own life. So starting out on my opening screen here, I picked this screen because of the face on that mediator. What do you think she's feeling? Hello? Oh. Am I muted still?
You're good.
Oh, okay, everybody heard that.
Yes.
So what do you think this mediator's feeling?
She looks stressed out to me.
Yeah, and in my beginning mediations, I felt that way quite often because I was hearing stuff that was really messy and hard to wrap my head around. When you get into people's personal lives, a lot of it you don't relate to because we're all different. And some of the things that I saw in relationships were a little nerve-wracking. My next slide is an introduction slide, so I'll skip over this one. I'd be remiss as a conflict person if I didn't make the case that conflict is very useful. That's one of the things I learned in conflict is there's a lot of good things that happen because of conflict, and we want to have it. We want to have it well. So going back to all these relationships, I'm not going to read through all that. I'm just making the case that conflict is good. But this idea of conflict in relationships. A relationship is a connection, association, or involvement between two or more people or entities, according to Merriam-Webster. And what does that mean? How many relationships are we in? We're in an awful lot. But we don't worry ourselves over most of them. But the conflict or the principles that I'm going to talk about today will apply to any conflict in any relationship. So feel free to use them in your work conflicts or home conflicts. I found it very useful with my children. And so we get drawn into relationships for a lot of reasons. Some of the ones that we're familiar with, we get into relationships for trust and connection, affinity, commonality, agreement, conflict, commitment, even duty, goals, fulfillment, and some not so useful things like for power, for security, aggression. I guess security is a good one. I've seen some pretty dysfunctional things hold relationships together. And these very same things that draw us into relationships were the same reasons I was hearing people say they wanted to get out of it. And so when I realized I didn't have to fix their relationship at this level, I knew I had to find something behind it that was common, because relationships were so different. There was no formula to fix every relationship. And so I thought there's got to be something behind it. And it began with the idea that we delineate our relationships by the significance that they hold to us. So I'm going to ask you a question. What makes relationships significant? What do we think of when we think of our most significant relationships? I'm asking for some feedback here.
Feel free to put answers in the chat.
Oh, okay. Open my chat. I see people are muted, I take it.
Yeah, it's set up where the participants aren't able to share, so.
Okay. Then I'll stop asking for answers, verbal. All right, overwhelmed, stressed. That's my mediator. So people who are close to us. So the type of relationship that we have, like a family relationship, or the role that goes with that, like father and child, or mother and daughter, husband and wife, business partners, the stakes that the relationship holds for us. That's the cost and rewards that we get from it. The feelings that we have for people, affinity, love, or admiration. Sometimes it's interdependence or dependence. We get together with people because we need them or we need each other. If we have a history with people, when we get to know people, it tends to build our affinity for them because they're more predictable to us. We've all experienced that where we didn't like somebody right off the bat, but after a while, we kind of warmed up to them and got to like them because they were predictable. So it was the significance of the relationship that I thought there's something there, I guess. And so what does conflict look like in a good relationship? If you can put a couple answers in the chat. Well, let's look at some relationships. So we've got these 15 pictures of all these relationships. Would you say these are all good relationships? So up in the top corner, we've got a doctor and a patient there. Would you say they have a good relationship? And I'm just going to jump to the chase here. The fact is, we don't know whether these are good relationships or bad because we see all kinds of different behaviors in relationships. Even the happy family down in the bottom right.
I'm sorry, Randall, can you move slides one? I think we're still on the slide before.
Oh, that would make a big difference. Sorry about that. So now you can see my pictures. So we've got the doctor and patient up in the left-hand corner, and all the way down to the family on the right. So we have different levels of significance. Some people are just strangers waiting in line in a grocery store, people in traffic, highly interdependent, but they really don't know each other. And so there's a lot of different situations. We don't know if that traffic's working well. We don't know if the people in the grocery store are getting angry. We don't know what's going on with this family in their life. So I didn't really find the clues in the behaviors that people were showing me in conflict. So I needed to dig a little further. And I heard this idea that, excuse me, I just opened my chat over top of all my windows. And that was Curly's rule. So what I was looking for was that one thing. So I'm going to show you a little clip from a movie. This is from the movie City Slickers. And we've got Mitch on the right. He's having a midlife crisis because over the meaning of his life. And he and his two friends go to this dude ranch to decompress. They meet Curly, this old cowboy, the guy on the left. And they admire him for his confidence and his demeanor and his cowboy skills. But Curly doesn't show them much respect because they're kind of a mess on the dude ranch. But during a rainstorm, Mitch demonstrates real heart when he saves this cow from drowning. And Curly starts to like him. And so they, on their way back from saving that cow, they kind of bond and they start talking about their life. And here's a conversation they have. I'll play for you.
You know what the secret of life is? No, what? This. Your finger? One thing. Just one thing. That's great, but what's the one thing? That's what you've got to figure out.
So this was my dilemma. We had to find that, what is that one thing? And what I landed on was the self-serving bias. When I started learning about this in different classes, in fact, it hit me from a couple of different directions in my college classes, that people interpret the meaning of things in ways that support our feelings of self-worth. So we have a self-image that we want to put forth out there and also live up to in our own minds. So we try to present ourselves in a way that projects that desired image to others. And this resonated with me, that what I saw in conflict when it was going bad was that people were acting in ways that did not support the other person's self-concept, or even worse, attack their self-concept, and that would cause escalation. So my bottom line on focusing on self-serving bias, not that I don't do a lot of those other things that mediators do or think about ways to solve things, but I am always considering, how could this affect the person's view of themselves or the way that they feel people look at them? So my bottom line in conflict is that we want to feel good about ourselves, and we want others to see us that way too. And so the best thing to do in conflict is to do unto others, which is I didn't write that. I stole that from a book. And so this idea that the way we tend to attack people in conflict is we become verbally aggressive. And I was studying in another class, a book on by a man named Dominic Infante. And he said the reason that people resort to verbal aggression is because they've either run out of a valid argument to present, or they don't have the skill to do it. And so my bottom line there is that we need to help people in conflict give their best presentation possible. And if we do that, things tend to go a lot better. So how do we do that? Knowing that conflict threatens our self-concept, and we're talking about entering into a conflict. And how does conflict threaten our self-concept? And that's because we learn who we are through communicating with others, especially in highly significant relationships. We all can look to people who greatly affected who we are, and it's because they were highly significant to us for one reason or another. And the more significant the relationship, the more they can affect our self-esteem. Now, the reverse of that is if someone is hurting our self-concept, one of the ways that we can soften that blow is we can lower the significance of the relationship. And this is where this really spoke to me on what goes wrong in conflict when people want to stop talking to each other, is because they think, well, you're just a problem. You're not really a person like me with good ideas and values and things like that. Or, you might even be the opposite of what or you make me feel the opposite of the way I want to feel. And so I'll minimize that relationship so I can feel better. So the way we build our self-concept through relationships is in communicating with people. We learn values, we take on beliefs, attitudes, and then those present themselves in the actions that we take. And we like to feel that all those things are in alignment in our lives, that our beliefs fit with our values, our attitudes fit with our beliefs and values, and our actions represent our values, beliefs, and attitudes. And so we want to feel like those things are in alignment. And so in conflict, sometimes we have to admit that maybe our actions didn't fit our attitudes. And that can be very scary for us because we like to avoid situations where our self-concept might not be supported. And so we have to overcome this in conflict somehow. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. And our approach, or our attitudes, beliefs, values, and actions can also be affected by the role we're playing. We can probably all relate to this. When we were children, we were a very different person in some ways with our friends than we were with our parents, because there were different attitudes, beliefs, and values that might be important in those roles and those relationships. And also, depending on what experiences we are having or have had, our personalities affect these things. When we take an action, the results of those actions can change these core elements of who we are. We also observe and we look at situations and we change. We can change according to those things as well. And so I saw these as things in a mediation or in a conflict with someone that I could support or understand about the other people, about why they might be acting the way they are, or what might be important to them, or how I might ask questions to get at what's going on that's affecting their ability to manage conflict. So when we perceive a personal attack, when someone challenges our self-concept or suggests our actions, attitudes, beliefs, and values are misaligned, we have to account for that in some way. And we do that by, we can either reject the perceived slight or attack, or we can accept the criticism and change. And of course, one of the things that will determine that is the significance we hold for the person in the conflict. When I was a young man, I worked on this ranch, and there was this old cowboy there, much like Curly back in the video. And when I noticed when he came around, everybody worked really hard because he was, being young men growing up in the West, we loved cowboys, and he was a real cowboy. And we really wanted his approval. He didn't say much, but if he shook his head yes when you were doing something, nothing felt better than that. And so he had a real effect on people's actions just by his presence. Now, when it comes to deal with conflict escalation starts when one or more of the parties perceive a message or action as attack against their self-concept. And what we might tend to do is to, when the offended party then replies with a self-concept attack, so someone attacks me, I attack them back. Like my little guys in the picture here. One guy says, that's the dumbest thing ever. And the other person says, no, you're the dumbest thing ever. And you can guess what happens from there. They're going to escalate. And it's not going to be good for their relationship. But in conflict, we need to be able to question and even disagree without escalating. So we need to come up with some ways to do that. And so I've got a few rules that help us in conflict. And the first one is we want to set expectations for engagement at the beginning. We want to make sure that the importance of the relationship is a focal point of the mediation. And you can just, and I think this should be explicit. You can say, look, this relationship's important to us. We don't want to do anything to harm it. And so we want to just monitor that and make sure that if we do get into something that starts to hurt our relationship, we stop and we figure out how to fix it. In my own interpersonal conflicts, I find it's useful to take the opportunity to be the listener first. Stephen Covey said, seek first to understand before we try to be understood. And though I think he did it because he wanted to know how the other person felt before he came up with his answer, I find that there's a lot more benefit to this because if we take the opportunity to listen first, then we can demonstrate how we want to be listened to. And one of the good things about most people I have found is that they will reciprocate. They will give you what you give them. So do unto others works. If we can replace judgment with curiosity whenever possible. For example, if instead of saying that won't work, we could say, if we do that, how could we avoid this potential problem? Or, people are going to hate that idea. Instead of that, we could say, what kind of complaints might we expect if we do this? And so you're not attacking their idea and saying it's wrong. You're being curious about it and exploring it. And that's a lot easier for people to take and less likely to have them feel like it's an attack. If escalation occurs, you want to stop it, name it, and determine a new way forward. For example, we're starting to escalate. How can we approach this differently? Or I see the issue is important to both of us. How can we take a quick break, gather our thoughts, and try again in 5 minutes? And this is a good place to reinforce the importance of our relationship when we're in this mode of stopping escalation. And then the final thing that I think is important is to be transparent and forthright. People don't like to feel like you're using strategies against them. So, and I use this in mediation quite often. I tell people exactly what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And it reduces their uncertainty about what I'm doing and makes them more likely to accept it. So if we're going to engage in affirming conflict, besides others' rules, I've got kind of a quick thing that those things will fit into. We start by reassuring the parties, either the person we're in conflict with, or if you're helping people through conflict, you want to reassure them with confidence that conflict can be managed in a way that doesn't have to be painful. We can do things like set the stage for good conflict in the beginning, and I'll get into that a little bit more. We want to make sure we start off with open-ended questions. We want to show that we're curious and interested, and this also gets the other person talking so they get an opportunity to speak first. We want to listen empathically, and one thing I have found is people in this business are good at this. We all have a lot of practice listening empathic, and that just means to pay attention to how people are feeling and react to those. We also want to be able to read the caller's emotional state Understanding how they feel, of course. Validate emotions and interests, and we'll talk about this, and reframing positions and interests next. So reassuring. So setting clear expectations for engagement reduces our uncertainty about and anxiety about and levels the playing field for people. If we all know the rules, it's good to give people right up front, say, look, at any time, if you're not feeling comfortable, I want you to stop and feel free to interrupt me. And we will take care of that, and then we'll move forward, because it's important that we both feel comfortable in this process. You want to let people know that they have come to the right place to be heard. They're not alone. There are resources available. We want to empathize with the difficulties that they're having, and let them know that we can provide the support and coach them in helping move forward towards problem solving. And you got to do this in a way that isn't like you're mansplaining or trying to take control of the process, but that it's a shared process. We want to share our goals for the engagement and express our interest in finding a solution that meets their needs as well as yours. Don't forget your own needs when you're setting up the engagement. And demonstrate interest in what they have to say. And that means that not only do you ask questions and stuff, but you also have to look interested. Be cognizant of your nonverbals. We want to address and process any elements in the room, like if we've had any negative events, escalations that we've had in the past, if there's any past mistakes that we've made, we want to acknowledge those, or if we've had failed engagements. And we want to commit to avoiding those things in the future and moving forward, and let them know that we are there to solve the issues and make sure their needs are met. When we go into the inquire stage, we want to start with those open-ended questions, because those are easy for people to answer, which is supportive of their self-concept. Tell me what you've seen, or tell me what you'd like to accomplish today is an easy answer for me, because I've thought about those things ahead of time. Very useful for getting people to start and expand their story. It shows interest and empathy when we ask questions. And for a little bit closer look, when we get into the listening, read, and validation and reframing part, validation is probably one of the major tools that a mediator uses in the beginning of a mediation to show each other's humanness. So if I have two parties, they've probably demonized each other in some way. And when I validate somebody, and I say, well, I can see this has been really hard to you. You love your children and you're worried about their education. It's hard for me to listen to that and not relate to it. And so this is a trick that mediators do, is we humanize them to each other by validating them in front of each other. And validation is a pretty easy thing. It just means letting them know that we've recognized what they've said and gotten to the meaning behind it. Like, this challenge has been a bit overwhelming, or you love Andre and will do anything to make his life better. You've struggled through some difficult situations and worked hard for Aletha's progress. These validations not only hit home to the party I'm talking to, but the person listening to them, it affects them as well. Now, I know most of you probably don't get into conflicts where you're trying to resolve a conflict between two people, but it might be just you and them. And this validation, if you try it, I couldn't believe what a difference it made with my teenagers, because I was a teenager. My kids were teenagers when I learned this. And this validation thing really worked. Even when they caught on to it. I remember one day my daughter said, "You're doing that mediation thing." And I said, "Yeah, I am. Does that bother you?" And she said, "No, not really. I just, and then she got back into her story. So that validation really worked. Reframing as interests. So when people hit us with positions like, I want you to do this, we can send that back to them with, well, I get what you're trying to accomplish. So an example would be, you want to feel more included in the decisions about Aislinn. So maybe they've said, you never include me in this process. I can come right back with, well, you want to feel more included in the decisions about Aislinn. Or you would like to see more progress in Shelley's reading. From your perspective, she needs more socialization. And so if we can get people focused on interests are negotiable. Or sometimes positions are not. And it's a place where we can agree with people. Like, I can understand why you'd want to have your child socialize. I know why you'd want to see improvements in your child's reading, or you would want to be included in these decisions. I'm going to check the chat real quick. Do we have any questions so far? Not seeing any questions. I'm going to move forward. So showing interest with more questions. We can ask probing and clarifying questions. Once the conflict is going and we've demonstrated interest, we want to follow up with probing and clarifying questions. And these you need to be a little more careful with, that you're not judging or pigeonholing people with these questions. So we want to search for questions that seek to dig deeper or explored side streets. Can be follow-ups from a previous question or an attempt to explore new avenues of inquiry. Clarifying questions, they seek to understand about something. And I've got some examples of these coming up. And clarifying questions can also be used to softly challenge ideas. So, for example, a probing question, how long has this been an issue? Sometimes that'll get us to, when did things start? And we'll get a discussion about maybe something that happened or events that are important. Clarifying question, what do you mean when you say it is inadequate? Sometimes people will make charges. For example, when I did divorce mediation, somebody would say, I'm worried about, him being abusive to our son. And, because I'm a mediator, I have to take those things seriously. So my immediate follow-up question is, what do you mean by abuse? Because I need to know if it's a reportable thing or if it's something we can work out. We can clarify to challenge ideas. I could say, when you said it was abusive, was that an accurate description? And then they can answer my question. I can probe and clarify at the same time by saying things like, so did you feel like your efforts were appreciated? So when it comes to probing and clarifying examples, we're going to run out of time. I have some extra slides on here that I'm not going to have to get to. I want you to know that they go with this next model that I'm going to talk about, Moore's circle of conflict. And they're just examples of questions we can ask in these 5 areas, but I want to talk about these areas that Moore came up with. And these are causes of conflict and where we can direct our questions. So by using this circle of conflict as a framework, we can ask more targeted questions. So if we get an idea that maybe this is about our relationship, we can ask certain questions. Or if I'm not understanding your interests, or our interests are different, I can target that area. So data conflicts, you'll see some questions listed in here. Like, can you elaborate on the records or notes that you have regarding the days Tyler was sent home? You said you have a neuropsych report. Has the IEP team seen it? Is there any other information we should look at? I can ask questions to explore their interpretations, like, is there more than one way to interpret the doctor's report? Or do you have questions about how they are tracking progress? And would additional tests provide more clarity or trust in the decision? If you got the same information from a trusted source, would that affect your position? If we have relationship conflicts, I can ask questions that address emotions like, what was this experience like for you? Or how have you been affected by some action or behavior? How has this conflict impacted your relationship? Or what was your relationship like before the problem started? Questions that tend to build trust between parties. And when we build trust, we increase the significance of the relationship. What should it take for you to feel more trust in the other party? How can we improve communication between the both of you? Or is there someone at the school who you feel has supported you that you have good communication with? And I see I have 1 minute left. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, Randall, I just muted you on when I was trying to unmute myself. I apologize. We can go until 1:15.
Oh, okay. Well, good. I'm going to talk about these a little bit more. I had it as 1 o'clock, so forgive me. So when we build trust between people, what is trust? And I'm looking in the chat. Right. Trust means that people are predictable. We believe we can predict how they're going to act. We often think about it as they're going to follow through. They're going to do the things that they say they're going to do. We can trust their word. And one of the ways that we can build trust is by helping the parties get to know each other. And so a lot of these questions in relationship conflict are just that. We're trying to connect to those, if we think back to the model of self-concept, values and beliefs. What I find is when we do these kind of discussions, what comes out are people's core values. And we're not a lot different when it comes to core values. Most of us who don't have maybe some personality disorder or something, but most of us, we want to be trusted, and we trust people who we know. And so these questions kind of get behind that and get people to know each other a lot better by just hearing the answers to these questions. Now, structural conflict, that gets to outside external situations that are affecting our relationship. So we ask questions to identify, for example, power imbalances. How do you feel about your ability to affect this situation? That gets at what kind of access do you have to decisions and things, and if we feel like things are being handed down to us instead of us being able to accept them and make decisions on them, that low power can feel like a self-concept attack and negatively affect our relationship or lead to escalation. How included do you feel in the IEP decisions? Now, we know that they're on the IEP team, they get to be there with the IEP team and everything, but do they feel like they're listened to? Do you believe that you have access to the information you need to participate effectively? We have that old saying, information is power, and if we feel like people are withholding information from us, we feel disempowered, and that can really affect our self-concept, our self-esteem. Questions to explore options for change that we can ask. What changes could be made to improve communication? Or what kind of barriers do you face in solving this situation? I did a mediation not too long ago with two parties who were in different time zones, And the time zones were causing a lot of issues with them. And so we came up with a plan to work that out, and they had never explored that problem until it came up when I talked about what kind of barriers, and one of the parties said, you know, they do these things, they set these things up where I have to be at work and get my work done, but then I've got to jump on and I really don't get the things I get done in the morning, and I don't feel like I'm ready for the meeting. And so we moved things back, and the other person had no idea that the time zone was caused, you know, the fact that it was earlier at this other person's work was causing all this problems for them. Could you offer your ideas to a short-term solution, and then we can come back and see how it worked? We can do a contingency agreement. We can change some structures and see how it works. But a lot of times those things need to be explored, and we need to test them and see if things are going to be okay. And interest conflicts, and this is a very common one. People think our interests don't align, and what they're usually stuck on are positions and not interests. So we need to ask questions to uncover the underlying needs behind those. So I could ask a question like, what do you hope to accomplish this semester for your child? Or what is your most pressing concern? What does a good outcome look like for you? And when they give you those answers, they may come back with positions, but then you can reframe them as interests. Does everybody feel like they understand the difference between a position and an interest? So I might ask for a raise as my position, but my interest is I want to make as much as my neighbor, or I want to feel like I'm respected as much as everybody else at work. All right. Questions to explore common ground. Are there things that you and the school already agree on? Do you have any solutions in mind that might be easy for everyone here to agree upon? Or what constraints do you think the school has in this matter? And instead of school, that could be anybody, but. And are there any solutions that meet your child's needs and address the school's concerns? Values conflicts can be some of the most difficult. But that's only if it's a true values conflict. I find these pretty rare. We do see them from time to time. So we want to ask questions that at least help us understand people's values. So for example, what's the most critical goal for Jackie's success? And Jackie being their child. And do you have any family or cultural values that we need to understand? Can you explain why blank is important to you? And then we're going to ask some follow-up questions that get at values. Which of those ideas would you prioritize? So maybe getting at how they value one thing over another and why. Questions to help us uncover common ground and values. Are there any shared values that we can build upon? Or I might guess at shared values that I feel have come up in the conversation, and I might ask, you know, is this a value we share? Is there, or even better yet, I could say that I understand you have this value, and I also share that value. And the next one, is there a difference between your view and the school's view of the critical goal for Jada? So I want to know if there's any strategies or words of wisdom that you have to share or we can also open this up to any questions that you have about anything I've said or anything
I
else.
do
you'd
see
like to ask me.
I do see one question, Randall, about if you have any ideas of specific statements or questions that parents might be able to make to the school.
Sure. I would have a lot of them. So let me ask you, what's the situation? So we want the parent wants to ask the school. I want to know what's behind it. Then I could come up with some questions.
We'll see if she puts that into the chat, but while
Oh.
we're waiting, maybe just something like if there's a disagreement over a goal in an IEP or a disagreement about services that maybe are being recommended.
Sure. In fact, I'm going to jump back to some of these questions and I'll just change them. I'm going to go back to the relationship conflicts and excuse me, data conflicts. So I could ask the school, for example, can I see what records or notes that you have that you're making these decisions about my child about, that you're using to make this decision about your child? I want to make sure that I have all the information. Asking if how people make decisions or what data they based it on, where that data came from. Asking if they have seen information that you've brought or considered it would certainly be good questions to ask. If they have any question, if you've brought them a report from a doctor and say, do you have any concerns about the report that I've brought for you to read? If we're exploring interpretations, well, this question works either way. Is there more than one way to interpret my doctor's report? Or I could say that I could ask a question about how they're tracking the child's progress. I hope I'm hitting what you're looking at. And frankly, all these questions ask for, like, maybe I have a teacher in an IEP who's talking about my child in the classroom, and I might ask the question, what's your experience with my son's presence in the classroom? Or, how have you, how's the team been, or how's the teacher been affected by the changes we've made to the IEP? How has this conflict impacted your relationship with your administrators? Or how were things in the classroom before this change? I'm just showing interest in them, and that shows that I care about my relationship with the school. Do I have any follow-up questions about that? I hope I am hitting this the way you wanted me to.
I think that's good. I don't see any follow-up in there, so I think that's great. And I am going to put something in the chat for if anybody else does have any specific questions about their individual situation, they are welcome to reach out to Partners Resource Network or to SpedTex to get help on a specific situation.
Right. I also would offer my email to anybody out there. If you get into a certain situation, or if you have even team problems or issues, I'm always open to an email, and I have lots of ideas for solutions, approaches to conflict. If you feel like
That's
hard to get along
fantastic.
with.
I do see one other question. If the best way to handle someone who is maybe being blatantly rude in a conflict situation, despite your ongoing efforts to be respectful, do you have any suggestions on how to deal with that kind of a situation where it's really just escalated to where it's a situation that has a lot of stress and a lot of miscommunication that's happening?
Yes, I statement is if I get repeated, my first inclination, if I feel a personal attack, is to, in fact, I have a method for dealing with personal attacks, or when I feel like someone is starting to escalate with me. And the first thing I like to do is I like to agree with them. So if somebody says, Randy, you're a jerk, you're not paying attention to anything I have to say, I'm going to agree with that. I'm not going to agree that I'm a jerk. But I am going to agree that it's upsetting when you feel like people aren't paying attention to you. This is supportive of their self-concept. You're basically just saying, yeah, you're right. And then I will offer my interpretation. So I can say, this is what I meant to say. And then I can validate their perspective or feelings, which I kind of did right up front. And then ask them for if there's anything they would like me to do differently. And if the attacks keep coming, then I'm not going to put up with being attacked. Nobody needs to put up with having someone attack your self-concept. So you need to say, look, I've got to stop everything in there. I'm going to say, here's my issue. I don't feel like I'm being treated with respect, and I felt like I've treated you with respect. And just call them on it. And if that doesn't work, then you need to maybe go to some go above their head or look for a different person to deal with. There are difficult people out there, not nearly as many people as I used to think there were before I learned how to deal with conflict. I find that you give most people a path to acting well, they will do it because that is supportive of my self-concept. I don't want to be a bad actor. So if somebody looks at me and says, what you're saying is it makes me feel bad. It's like you're attacking me personally, and I don't think that's what you mean to do, but this is how it feels. And I might even offer them, instead of saying it this way, I wish you had said it this way. Which I'm gonna tell a story on someone I know. I'm not gonna tell you who they are, but I have a couple who's really good friends. And I was sitting there one day, and she said something, and he looked at her and he said, "Why would you say something dumb like that?" And she looked at him and she said, "Now, how do you wish you had said that?" And he said, "Oh, I don't understand why you did it that way." And she says, "There, I'll accept that answer." And she answered him. And later I looked at her and I said, "Man, why did you do that?" And she said, "I'd much rather talk to the husband who thinks about what he says than the one who just blurts stuff out. So I give him that opportunity." So the way I feel about the person who's not acting well in conflict is we need to help them act better. And we point out what they're doing that's not working for us. We ask them to change. We treat them as well as we can. And if it doesn't work, don't put up with the abuse. Move on. But I find that it works more often than it doesn't. Most people do want to act well when they're put on that and given that choice to be a person who conflicts well or conflicts poorly. And I find most people will take the path that looks the best. Makes me feel better about myself, and we want to do conflict well. We want to feel like we have abilities to work through things. Failed conflict is a hit to our self-concept, and so just giving people that opportunity to do better, I think will work for you. And then I guess if all else fails me, or if all else fails, call me, and I'll call them and talk to you for them.
And I did put your email in the chat. So I want to thank you
Right.
again, Randall, for being here today. We really appreciate all the knowledge. I know I took away some things that I can use at home and with other people that I interact with. And I hope that everyone that was here today feels the same way. We are going to launch a poll. We would love to get some feedback from everyone that was here today. And again, this webinar was recorded and it will be posted on the Region 10 website. So thank you everyone for being here today.
And I am putting I've got a couple of things to say real quick. We've got an upcoming webinar in October coming up in about 9 days. That's very useful. If you can find that on the CADRE website, a link to register. There's a two-part webinar series on IEPs that's available. You can go to the information's on the PowerPoint. You can register for that. There's our CADRE Symposium in October of 2025 in Portland. Please come to that. I'd love to meet you all. And if you need resources or support, come to CADRE. And the last thing I'll say is I'm putting a link to an evaluation that CADRE would like you to complete in the chat. Or on this screen, there is a URL here that you can click. And then over here is another one you can subscribe to the CADRE newsletter. There, I did my public service now.
Fantastic. We'll leave that up there for a few minutes and give everybody a chance to get all of those links. So thank you so much for being here.
All right. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.